Do my glasses look fucked up? Because they are. I just came. I can't. I've scratched them up so bad.
Do you want some of my sunglasses? I've got 5
okay.
pairs of sunglasses in there. Is this thing on?
Yes. Hi, I'm Erin Spencer.
And I'm Stacy Smith.
And this is Between Two Brokers, a podcast about real estate, business, and life.
Hang in there. We're smarter than we look. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Brokers. Today, we have Mickey Bakst, and I'm going to let Erin introduce him. This is one of Erin's many boyfriends.
How did I get so lucky?
She's obsessed with you.
Does Ellen know?
Ellen says, "Take them, please."
Yeah, I would too. I mean, for my husband. Yeah, so Mickey was the general manager of Charleston Grill for 20 years.
20 years.
20
yes.
years. And then has started many great causes, Ben's Friends, Feed the Need. We'll get to all of that stuff. I want to start with, we were just at Dining for a Cause, the fundraiser for Feed the Need last Sunday. You were a wonderful host. And one of the first things you said when you got up on stage, which shocked me, was that you have been in Charleston for 20 years. And I just felt like you've been in Charleston for 40, 50 years because there's no one here that doesn't know who you are.
And I'm that old, so.
So take us back to, like, where did you grow up? How did you get to Charleston? How long have you been in food and beverage? All those things.
Got it.
Tell us about little Mickey.
I grew up in Michigan, and I had a very nice upbringing, but something inside me was wrong. I had great loving parents, great education, everything, but I couldn't connect with anyone. I left home at 16 years old, got involved in drugs and alcohol, made a lot of money doing illegal things, but the statute of limitations has expired, so it's okay.
We can talk about it.
And ended up buying into a restaurant in Newport Beach, California. How I got to Newport Beach was I chased a woman across the country, and I became close friends with this man who owned this great, great nightclub dinner house on the pier on the Balboa Peninsula in Newport Beach. And as I wasn't working, I hung out there a lot, and we became very close, and we shared certain proclivities, which was drugs and alcohol, and eventually he needed help financially, and I said yes, and I became partners in the restaurant. I had no aspirations to be in the restaurant business when I was younger. It never even crossed my mind.
So you were in your 20s?
Yes.
Okay.
I came from a family of doctors, a family of lawyers. The restaurants were the furthest thing from my mind. But something happened one night, and I will never, as long as I live, forget the magic of the experience. The guy who became my partner said, "My doorman didn't show up. Would you sit at the door and ask for IDs?" And to this day, it was one of the most memorable nights I had. I fell in love with making people smile. People walked out and said, "We waited an hour in line, and it was the best hour that we had." And I sang, and I danced, and I stood on a stool and told ridiculous jokes, and people loved it, but so did I. And that was the beginning of my hospitality. I had that restaurant for a number of years. I lost it to my alcohol and drugs. I was found in a hotel room on the verge of death, and my partner said, "You got to get out of there. I want to buy you out." And there was no other place for me to go. My family moved me back to Detroit. I was 30 years old, and I started getting sober, and I started my journey to sobriety. And I tried for a very short time doing something else, selling yellow pages, and I hated it.
Yeah.
and I missed the magic of the restaurants. And I made a conscious decision that I wanted to be in restaurants, but I couldn't be in bars anymore. And so I made a commitment to go into high-end fine dining. And early on, I'm laying in bed in early AA, getting sober, because AA is where I got sober. And I have the AA book, and I have a stack of books on wine right next to it. And at night, I would read both of them. And I just had a desire for the magic of bringing people together, the joy of watching people enjoy themselves, of creating experiences. And eventually, we'll clean this up and quicken it up, I ended up in northern Michigan when I was traveling around the country trying to get my shit together, for lack of better words, and I was driving from Alaska to Florida and everywhere in between. And I ended up in northern Michigan, and I had dinner at a restaurant called Tapawingo. And it was on 8 acres of property with gardens that magazines had photographed. And the next morning, I was leaving the area to go on to the next spot, and I knocked on the door. I went at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I knocked on the door, and the guy who owned it at the time, who's still a dear friend many, many years later, he said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "I have to tell you, I had the single greatest meal of my life last night here. But your service is atrocious, and it sucks, and I can help you make this restaurant better." And I walked in, and we spent 2.5 hours talking. And that relationship continues today. That was 1987. We are still very close. And then I had do you want all this shit?
Yes.
Then I
We
had
want
this,
all this shit.
I had this billionaire who kept coming at me and wanting, he was the largest manufacturer of automobile assembly lines in the world. And he wanted me to build a restaurant in Detroit for him. And I just didn't want to, but he kept coming and coming and coming. And so I finally sold my share in the other restaurant, Tapawingo, and I opened a restaurant called Tribute that went on to great national acclaim. Gourmet magazine, one of the top 25 restaurants in the world, even though today I don't know how I believe that shit, because nobody really is a serious reviewer. They're influencers now. No offense to all the influencers that are out there. Back then, Ruth Reichel was the editor-in-chief of Gourmet magazine. She came to the restaurant from New York 4 times before she ever introduced herself. And we went on to create a restaurant that every great chef in America came to, and every great chef in America did dinners. And then I left there, took a 1.5 years off, decided that I was going to, I can swear and everything?
Yes.
So the funny story is I decided that I put out word in the industry I didn't want to own anything. I wanted to run somebody's restaurant. And I had wonderful offers from all over in the country, including they were building the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas. And I was offered the position of maitre d' to the high rollers for the top 3 restaurants that were going to be in the hotel, which was at the time Danielle Ballou, who was a friend of mine, Alex Strada, who was a friend of mine, and Takashi Yagahashi, who was a friend of mine. And as we were flying back, my wife gave me her famous line, "I love you. I'll go if this is what you think is right, but let's be honest. You're a drug addict, a drunk, a gambler, and a whore. Why the hell would we go to Las Vegas?" Yeah. And 2 days later, Bob Wagner called me here in Charleston, and that was the beginning of this. I came here. I walked down to the Battery. I watched the sunrise I called my wife and I said, sweetheart, come here. I think I found home.
Mm-hmm.
That
Is
was
she from
20
Michigan too?
Yeah, she was.
Yeah. I think the battery sells
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Yeah, it was sunrise. It was sunrise. I walked from the Charleston Place Hotel. I had never worked for a company. I had never worked for a hotel. I had told them if they wanted a 5-star restaurant, I was not the guy. I didn't want anything to do with it. I'll make it a 4-star and we'll really make it welcoming, but I can't do 5-star. And they gave me everything I wanted. And it was a great run.
And certainly while you were there, other places tried to poach you.
Other places here?
Yeah.
No, nobody had the audacity to
Really?
try. No, no. I made it. I think that those restaurants that might have poached me, I think everybody knew that this was my kingdom. And I don't mean that arrogantly, but the Charleston Place was a place of power for me. Mm-hmm. It was an introduction into the community with backing of people that allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do.
For context, a lot of people don't know what Charleston was like 20 years ago. It was entirely different. You know, Charleston Place, which is now, it's Belmont.
No, it's now Charleston Place again.
Okay.
Belmont sold it.
Okay. So Charleston Place Hotel was the grand dame of hotels in
Yes.
Charleston. It is where you stayed.
Yeah.
Your restaurant was the top. I mean, I know there were some rivals, but the other thing I wanted to ask you about, you know, this is when people were starting to come up in Charleston. We had Johnson and Wales. So I don't even know if we had like the Sean Brock yet and
No.
Cypress
No,
or
we
any,
did
we
not.
didn't have any of that yet. You had like Planner. You had
It was
Peninsula.
We had
Peninsula
Mike
Grill,
Lotta.
Carolinas
Lotta.
and Charleston
Yeah.
Grill was what I
Oh,
remember.
Carolinas,
And
yeah.
Fig, too, which
Yeah.
opened in 2004.
The thing I wanted to ask you is, okay, so yes, everybody can see that you're, you know, the king of this domain and this is the best. But do you also think that in Charleston, people in business are just kind of friendly and respectful and not aggressive? You know, had you been in New York or like a real, you know, LA, something like that, I mean, isn't business entirely different than it is in Charleston?
I'm wary and I hesitate in answering you because I beg you to know that at times I sound really arrogant, but I don't feel really arrogant. Charleston was a discombobulated community of restaurants. There was no real camaraderie. There was no real partnership. It was a much slower city then, and everybody was doing what they could to survive, but there wasn't a real thread running through it. In regards to were people different than in New York, I literally, without exaggeration, had somebody tell me that, listen, kid, you'll never make it in this town. I had somebody literally, no exaggeration, sort of push me up against a wall and tell me, you listen, I'll tell you how it's done here. Mm-hmm. My personal opinion of Charleston was, what the hell are these people about? I'll be very frank. It took time for the community of restaurants to come together and the attitude of the city to change a little bit. And I think much as people dislike hearing this, the change came as more people from off came in.
I agree.
And the mentality started changing. There were many times 20 years ago where I said, where are we? What is this? Who are? You know, there was a very hard, we're not going to accept outside. We don't want outsiders here. Go back where you came from. It was really predominant. Mm-hmm. The restaurant community had not evolved either, which was, and I give Helen Hill a tremendous credit for what she's done. But when I came to Charleston, history was the predominant sales thing. It was not food and beverage. Now, food and beverage and hospitality is the number one thing that we get voted for that gets us that best restaurant or best city of the year. I hope I answered your question.
You definitely did.
Yeah.
And we have tons of Michiganders here, and I love Michiganders. They have such a great sense of humor. My theory is because it's so cold there. That
So
you have-
frickin' cold.
Much like today.
And by the way, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
People don't realize how beautiful northern Michigan is.
Yeah.
Detroit's Detroit, but northern Michigan is great.
So when I was at College of Charleston and my parents would come visit, I'm like, oh, Dad's paying for dinner. We're going to Charleston Grill, which was my first interaction with you. And
I remember you asked for my phone number.
Yeah.
I said I was married. You said it doesn't matter.
I don't care.
I said my wife would care. Yeah, go on.
This episode is brought to you by Bill Payne with First Home Mortgage, NMLS number 283298. I've been using Bill for over 20 years for all of my mortgage needs. He's a pro. He's excellent at communication. What's happening with interest rates? We do not know. Call Bill at 843-532-1392 and he will answer all of your questions about mortgages, rates, and what's best for you.
I remember very distinctly you coming up to my table. And this memory is the reason I wanted to name this episode with you, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Because you didn't know me, you didn't know my parents. You made us feel so seen and heard and welcome. And it was obviously something I remember 20, however many
Thank
years
you.
later. It is, I don't know if it's a gift that you just naturally came by or if it's something that you've practiced at. But it would be wonderful if more people had that. Can you talk, is it just something that you are naturally good at, or is it something that you've really practiced at?
It's, I've always diminished my own self by saying I'm not that smart. The gift that I was given is just that, a gift. I don't know, and we've talked about it with industry professionals. I've talked about it with professors at different schools. I don't know how you change and train somebody to do what I believe I did. I hear what you say, what you just said, so often that I cannot begin to tell you. It just fills me with joy. But I hear it all the time. Mm-hmm. I hear people remembering things I did for them 30, 40 years ago. I used to have people at the Charleston Grill come in who had been to the Studio Cafe, my first restaurant, been to Tapawingle, been to Tribute, and walked in and saw me, and I swear to you, literally got tears in their eyes. Mm-hmm. I believe that what I do comes from my soul. I believe what I do is from my heart. And I believe that what I do is nothing really special other than treating everybody the way that I would want to be treated. There's no rocket science here. You know, when I had a program here in Charleston called Teach the Need, which we've disbanded because the school district was difficult to work with. We were in 8 high schools training 12th graders in the skills they needed to work in the restaurant industry. These were all Title I schools. These were all kids living below the poverty level. And we did this for years. And I organized and went to every class and was involved in every graduation. I always did the first class, and I said, there's no secret. It's like you learn in church. Do unto others as you want unto yourself. And that's sales. Mm-hmm. And that's sales of anything. How do you touch somebody? You touch them by being genuine, by being warm, by being considerate and compassionate, and they see that. And I think that was my gift. I never studied, trained. I just love people.
Cue Stacy's favorite quote of all time.
Yeah. So Maya Angelou, people will forget what you say and what you did, but they will never forget
how you made them feel.
That's all that it is
That's
for me.
That's all that it is.
Yeah. So when you came in today, you, of course, have a strong connection with Erin and said hello and everything. And then you made it a point to pet my forearm and say, like, I see you. But isn't it kind of that? I mean, it's just that simple. There's somebody there.
It's that simple.
And I think my dad actually has a gift, and your dad too, with this, where I think, because you're right, I don't think it can be taught. I try to teach it, repeat it constantly. My dad is so present. He's a school teacher. He taught elementary school. And when he is with you, anybody, he is just completely fixated on you. He is fully present. He's asking you questions. He is genuinely interested. And I think the problem for most people is that they're thinking about themselves, not because they're selfish or anything. Maybe there's some insecurity. It doesn't, you know what I mean? But like, I think if you can just shift your focus, I feel so much more comfortable when someone else is talking, when I'm listening to them, when I'm learning about them and asking them questions. I would so much rather say yes and understand what they need. I think, it's so simple, and I think we make everything so complicated.
I couldn't agree more. I always use the example of how hard is it to teach somebody in a retail store, in a restaurant, to look up in the eyes and say hello with a smile. Mm-hmm. That's all it takes. Mm-hmm. That's all it takes. Care enough that somebody's there. I don't know. It doesn't happen often.
Do you have a trick for remembering people's names?
No, I can't. I'm 72 years old and my brain is shit. It's like a sieve. I had a natural ability to not only remember names, remember where people sat, what they ate a year later, and what they drank. And I don't know how that happened. So I don't have a trick for that. And I will tell you, as I get older, it's Samantha, right? As I get older, it gets worse. I have a very hard time. And I haven't figured out yet how to do that. But I think that's another thing that comes sort of naturally. When I was younger, I had Rolodexes. Mm-hmm. And I made cards on everybody. So that before they came in, I knew that their daughter went to this school, or their son was studying this, or blah, 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 blah. They liked this wine or this cocktail. And I could literally, in a Rolodex system, every customer, I kept files and files. I had my pharmaceutical file, my doctor file, my regular tourist file, once a year file. And then Open Table came, and I was able to use that as a tool. Those things aided me, but a lot of it was natural. Mm-hmm. So I hate to tell you this. Everything you're going to ask me, I'm going to say, I don't have any idea how it happened. It's just me. That's who I am.
I have a
This is going downhill. Yeah.
Leading to, okay, so I want to talk about your causes. You obviously, so you're in the food and beverage business, and you are sober, and you can relate to people who are struggling. How have you learned over the years to communicate with those people in a way that is effective?
With the ones who are having a problem, or the ones that are just not aware they have a problem? There's two separate things.
Okay.
There's two separate things there. The ones that are not aware, you just have to walk with them and give them their space to be who they are and accept it, because they can't control. They've drank. But the ones that are looking for help, we do this thing with Ben's friends. We talk to HR directors. The most important thing is communicating with them openly and honestly, and not turning your back on them, and not judging them, and not pointing a finger at them, but giving them understanding, letting them know that you've been there, letting them know that you're there to help. And, my industry was really bad for years. I was bad for years. An employee came in, was drunk. I said, get the hell out of here. Don't come back. Shame on me. Nowadays, we teach people how to talk to them, to say, I've watched, something's happening, I care, what's going on, what can I do? And offering yourself to listen to them.
This episode is brought to you by Brian Wells at Coastal Creek Design. Check them out at coastalcreekdesign.com. Erin, remember when we had Brian on the podcast recently?
Yes.
I was so impressed with how he had a team of people, structural engineers, architects, designers, all in-house, all a one-stop shop for your renovation and new build needs. What did you think about it?
I think what they offer is invaluable because a renovation can be so daunting sometimes. You have no idea where to start. Do you start with the architect? Do you start with a contractor? Do you start with the house first? I don't know. No one knows. And so really having that one-stop shop makes the process so much more efficient.
Yeah, and simpler. So we definitely recommend calling Brian Wells at Coastal Creek Design if you're considering a renovation or new build project. We highly recommend them. And you know what else I like? I like the demeanor of everyone I know that works there. I think they're calm, I think they're chill, and I think you need that when you're doing a renovation, addition, or new build.
Definitely, because your emotions will be through the roof.
Yes, so check out the chill people at coastalcreekdesign.com. How can you tell the difference between an addict who is aware or unaware?
And somebody who's just drunk.
Yeah.
It's something in the eyes. We all say, all of us addicts will tell you, there's a look that we can identify with, that it's a desperation. It's a, I need this. You can see that. You can see that clearly. At least those of us in recovery think we can,
So tell us about how Ben's friends got started. And who is Ben?
Yeah.
I mean, I know, but...
Steve Palmer, who many who are listening probably know. Steve Palmer is a local restaurateur with a number of restaurants. He and I would get together every week because I needed somebody sober in the community, in restaurants, who understood. He didn't know he needed it, but I told him he needed it. And we started getting together regularly every week and just going to breakfast and just talking. And every week we found ourselves talking about another food and beverage person who had destroyed their career or ruined their lives or died. And this industry is filled with that. And there's two stories that happened. Steve has his story with Ben, which I'll get to. I have a story of my own. I, every year for 15 years, did the premier event at the Charleston Food and Wine Festival. And that year, I had some of the greatest chefs in America here to do a tribute dinner to a guy named Daniel Boulou, who is unquestionably one of the top 10 chefs in, many will say, in the world. And I convinced Danielle to come down, not to cook, but to take an honor. And I got 5 of the people who came out of Danielle's kitchen who had gone on to make legends of themselves. And they all came down.
Wow.
And at that dinner was the other people that came down was a guy named Danny Meyer, who's a big presence in restaurant. Ruth Reichel, who was the food editor, the editor-in-chief of Gourmet Magazine. Nancy Silverton, a true legend. I mean, true. And a number of other, for lack of better words, legends in the food and beverage business. And I decided that they were all my guests, and so I needed to do a brunch for them, or a meal for them. And I called Michael Toscano at Le Farfalle, and I said, will you close your restaurant? I'm going to do this. I want you to do a lunch for this. He said, hell yes, I'll close the restaurant. And literally that table was, and you can understand, I mean, it was a legendary table of food and beverage professionals. And there was a kid in Michael's kitchen named Drew Tusey. And forgive me, because I always choke up. Michael and Drew cooked this meal. Every chef in that room stood and applauded. Everybody offered Drew their card and said, if you ever want to move to LA, if you ever want to move to New York, blah, blah, blah. Everybody was just crazy about what they did. Danielle was standing on his chair, shaving truffles over the things. Everybody was, Drew went home that night and drank and drugged himself to death. And that was, for me, really devastating. A short while later, Steve was opening a restaurant in Florence, South Carolina, and called Town Hall. And he had 3 chefs there. Our dear friend Scott Crawford from Raleigh. If you ever go to Raleigh, eat at any of his restaurants, call me.
He's fun to look at, too.
My wife, sometimes I come into the house, it's dark, she's in bed, she goes, Scotty, is that you? I go, what? Yeah, Scott's gorgeous. I take pride in, he just wrote an article. I was his first sponsor and helped him in the beginning. And actually tomorrow is his 20-year anniversary.
Wow. Yeah.
Scott and a couple others were working at this restaurant for Steve. He called a fella that he had been working with years ago in Atlanta, a chef by the name of Ben Murray. And he said, Ben, can you come and help us with this restaurant? Ben came. Nobody knew he had a problem. Nobody knew he had been in 5 rehabs. Steve certainly didn't know. And Ben didn't show up. And they went to the hotel room, and Ben had shot himself, surrounded by bottles of booze. That was Steve's breaking point. I think we'll both tell you different stories, but here's the way it really happened, and it's true. We were sitting at Mercantile and MASH. I said, okay, it's enough. We've been saying we're too busy for too long. We're going to call Hannah Raskin. We're going to call Teresa Taylor. We're calling all the papers, and we're going to say Steve Palmer and Mickey Bakst will be at this location every single Sunday at this time. And Ben's Friends was born.
And how many people were at the first one, and how many people show up today?
I think it's like 22 were at the first one. Mm-hmm. And, today we average on the live meeting between 12 and 20. But the Zoom meetings now, COVID was a boom for us. COVID introduced us to people all over. And now we have 24 chapters around the country that meet live. We have daily Zoom meetings at 1 p.m. Eastern. We have nightly Zoom meetings four nights a week. We have a men's meeting, a women's meeting, a family meeting. And now we have people coming from France, from Spain, from Germany, from England, from Canada, just to come and create a community to help each other. And somebody will come in their first day, and like I'll get a text. I got a email the other day on our website, and within 5 minutes, I had 3 people calling that person, letting them know they were there for them. So we help through community. And I'll say with great pride, we're spreading. I don't know if you've ever heard of the restaurant Noma in Copenhagen.
Yes.
I just got invited to speak there at a symposium. They're flying me to fucking Copenhagen.
Do you need some arm candy?
Do I need some what?
Arm candy?
Honey, you're staying home.
Mickey, you have 2 arms.
Yeah. So that's how that started.
It's really powerful.
I'm going to interrupt you. It is the greatest joy of my life. And I've done things that I'm really proud of. But to get a call from a kid who literally was at death's door and have them say, today I'm 6 months or a year sober. To get a call from a woman in LA who I talked to 3 years ago who didn't want to believe she could stay in the restaurant business, and she calls me up to tell me I've been named a managing partner of a major steakhouse. To get these calls and see this, I can't even begin to express to you how incredible it makes me feel.
Nothing tops it.
Yeah.
Can we have a bowling break, please?
Yeah. Well, I think this is going to end up being a 2-episode sit down because we still have so much more to get to. I will end this episode by saying I don't think anyone who has ever worked in food and beverage has not known someone that has had addiction issues.
Nobody.
Or worse. I worked in food and beverage my first 8 years living in Charleston, and back then, at least Capone's stayed open until 6 a.m. Some stayed open until 4,
Right.
3.
That's what I hear.
And you would walk out of a restaurant with $300-$400 in cash in your pocket, and it's midnight or whatever. It's very easy to fall into those problems, and I have had addiction issues that I've talked about very openly on this podcast before. But same, I had a very close friend of mine. We worked at Oak Steakhouse together when it first opened, and we had an all-night
Coke Steakhouse.
Coke Steakhouse, yes. Can't run 3 flights of stairs all night without a little boost in your pocket.
Yeah.
We had an all-night bender, and when we slept it off, I woke up, and my buddy called. He said, "I need you to take me to rehab." And he has been sober since that day, and that has been got to be 19 years now.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's incredible the willpower that food and beverage people have, 1, to get into this business, but then 2, to either not go down the path and be tempted by those addictions in the late night, just parties that are available to you, and then to pull out of it. I also think that food and beverage people make incredible real estate agents. So many people on our team have come from that background.
Born salespeople. And just hard workers. Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to comment about that, but I don't know if you are a hard worker and so you sign up to work in a restaurant, or a restaurant makes you a hard worker and it's something that never leaves you after that.
I think a lot of people they don't know what they're doing. And they have no idea where their career path is, where they're going in life. And so they go into restaurants. And I think that's where they learn what hard work is. Because being amongst a team, you cannot survive in a restaurant if you work as an island. And they need to work as a team. And for the restaurant to function, it takes hard work. And people get tuned into that and tuned into the the pride of being in the restaurant, even in restaurants that you and I might not think are that big. I mean, I have 5 guys. We would go to IHOP on Saturday mornings, because let's be honest, there's not a great breakfast place in town here. And so we'd meet at IHOP, and there were people working there who were proud to be part of it. So it doesn't matter what level. I think that the restaurant teaches people strength. And going to your salespeople, I can say this for front of the house people. I don't know that real estate is good for back of the house. Let's be honest.
I don't think we have any back of the house.
Let's be honest. You don't have that. You know, it's. Listen, I've worked with so. We won't go there. The truth of the matter is, to work successfully in a restaurant, you need to learn how to communicate well with people. And that communication skill is the foundation of what it takes to be successful. You create a mini relationship in a short period of time, but your relationship and how good it is what your tip is dependent on. And you learn to be good, to make people feel good. And you get out of there and you go into real estate sales. What is it? It's relationships. It's treating people a certain way. So,
I mean, I think you have to, you pay attention, because like my first job, I was 15 at Ciccione's Pizza in Winston. Erin and I went to high school together and grew up together, kind of. So, but I never knew that people could be rude because my parents were never rude.
Yeah, you see a whole other side of
I
it.
mean, so I was like 15 and getting reamed, for like, I didn't ask for pepperoni on my pizza, and I was like, oh my gosh. But just, does somebody want you to pay attention to them all the time? Do they want to be left alone? You're just reading. You're just paying attention.
Right. And you're also learning how to deal with the rude people in a way that disarms them and makes it better.
Taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And we'll wrap it up there. And
stay tuned for part 2. Do you have time to stick around for a little part 2?
Right now?
Yeah.
As opposed to coming back?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening.
Took what, 4 months for us to...
I know. We had to cancel Mickey twice for weather issues.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And we will put links to all of Mickey's causes and everything in the show notes. We will see you next time.